Hello, good evening, and welcome to the IBB Legacy Dialogue. This dialogue is held to mark the 82nd birthday, which happens to be today. Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida is arguably one of Nigeria's most admired and influential leaders in recent history. IBB, as he is fondly called, has endeared himself to Nigerians and remained enigmatic and relevant 3 decades after leaving office and still counting. He was a very outstanding gentleman officer, a detribalized Nigerian who passionately led Nigeria through economic prosperity, coupled with some political crises before he stepped aside, having served 8 years in office. IBB's relevance in the life of Nigeria is not just about being head of state, but the charm, the candor, and charisma that he exudes defines his cerebral persona. He is a master of the art of influencing decision-making by deploying his power of objective and balanced reasoning on national issues. He has built a network of friends across the country such that 30 years after leaving office, his hilltop residence is in the quiet and serene city of Minna in Niger State, still plays host to many Nigerians from all over the world. This year, as always, we continue to deliberate on and celebrate this distinguished icon of Nigeria and indeed Africa, as well as dwell on the ideals he believes in and lives for: good governance, patriotism, nationalism, justice, and equity for all. This year, the IBB Legacy Dialogue has put together this tele-discourse to celebrate this unique enigma and leader of leaders in a most unique way. The Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida Legacy Dialogue serves as a platform for leadership development for the African continent. The dialogue analyzes the impact of good policies on the growth of the continent. This includes civil society, transformational agents, non-state actors, and government. It promotes the foundation for a global discourse and narrative that puts transformational leadership at the center of global efforts to achieve the Millennium Development Goals. This year, the IBB Legacy Dialogue series will continue its tradition by hosting a 2-hour live tele-discourse on African Independent Television, AIT. And the theme of this year's deliberation is New Paradigm, New Generation, and New Ideas. The purpose of this discourse is to foster meaningful conversations and constructive deliberations on matters that concern the future of our beloved nation. It is being held today, the 17th August, to celebrate the 82nd birthday of this great icon, His Excellency, General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, GCFR. Let me humbly invite the convener of this discourse, Her Excellency Aisha Babangida, to give us her opening remarks.
It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the Ibrahim Babangida Legacy Dialogue. And I'm delighted that we have been able to widen participation by making this a tele-discourse, so we can involve fellow citizens far and wide in shaping in public discourse and deepening our democracy. As you know, the Ibrahim Mariam Babangida Presidential Library is here to promote a culture of appreciation for the labors of our nation's past heroes. But today, we also look into the future. Our theme is a new paradigm, a new generation, and new ideas. Our esteemed speakers today will explore the new realities facing Nigeria, from the economy to foreign affairs to global climate change. We're here to raise questions, discuss a variety of issues, but the goal is to come up with solutions to the challenges faced by our country. At last year's dialogue, we were looking forward to the presidential elections and praying that Nigeria would have the kind of government it deserves, it needs. A government that is strong but compassionate, open and accountable, and that brings justice and opportunity for all. Our foundation is a nonpartisan foundation, so we neither endorse nor oppose particular parties and politicians. But we wish nothing but success for all those charged with the great responsibilities of stewarding our nation. And we understand that difficult decisions must be made. President Tinubu's administration certainly cannot be accused of shying away from such decisions. As promised, the government has ended the fuel subsidy that Nigerians had taken for granted, but put a stop to the central bank's distorted foreign exchange rate. And as predicted, these measures have led to economic hardship, with prices skyrocketing, not only for fuel, but also for food and other basic necessities. The president acknowledged last week that people are being hurt by this. But he insists that there is no other way to secure a more viable future for Nigeria. Perhaps he is right. And we all hope that we'll be able to look back on these measures as a causing short-term pain for long-term gain. But this dialogue is an opportunity to take a step back and consider a variety of perspectives. Nothing is off the table. From alternative economic thinking to creative ideas about how to make the most of the current government's policies. For example, the president has pledged to use the savings from the cutting of the fuel subsidy to relieve the pain and stimulate future growth. He announced 500 billion naira package to improve food supply, ease transportation cost, and boost manufacturing, with conditional grants to at least 1 million small businesses. This is certainly something very close to my heart, as a capacity as a chairman of the Better Life Program for the African Rural Women, which of course is focused on empowering women to create their own business. As you know, young people in our country cannot simply go out and get jobs because the jobs are not available. That means we must do all we can to promote the launch of a new SME, and indeed the micro and the macro SME, to form the grassroots to the flourishing Nigerian economy of the future. So I look forward to hearing your ideas on how to relieve the hardship of our fellow Nigerians, while also building the foundation of future growth across the economy, from agric to technology and everything in between. Of course, we will consider foreign affairs, and in particular, the growing instability in our region. There is now serious talks of ECOWAS intervening militarily in Niger to restore the democratically elected government. So we have an opportunity to discuss it, if that is wise, and a possibility for alternative. We should also acknowledge the bigger picture and the fact that Niger is not alone. A string of West African states have fallen to coups d'etats in recent times. Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso. So we must face the possibility that yet others could follow. The tragedy is that most of us thought we had left this kind of thing behind. The recent history of democracy in Africa has not been completely smooth sailing. But despite many setbacks, the general trajectory seemed to be a move from tyranny, dictatorship, towards popular democracy. Indeed, the Ibrahim and Maryam Babangida Presidential Library Foundation exists to help young Nigerians understand their history and the role of people like my father in paving the way for democracy. So it is incredibly disheartening to see so many of our neighbors seemingly going the wrong direction. It is also important to note that it is not a case of the old guard returning to power. In fact, these coups have been driven by the anger and frustrations of the younger generations. They are understandably upset that democracy does not seem to be working for the betterment of the people. They see that their countries are blessed with abundant natural resources, fertile land, water, sunshine, and yet, still, people are hungry. They are frustrated that there are no jobs, no opportunities, no future for them. And so when powerful military men claim they can do better, the youth are drawn to their side. It is essential to understand the underlying causes behind these coups if we are to restore democracy and prevent the spread of military dictatorship. Beyond national and regional concerns, of course, we must also consider global issues. And paramount among them is the issue of climate change. If it is allowed to continue unchecked, climate change will only exacerbate our economic problems, leading to further political instability and even international conflicts. We are already seeing the devastating effects of climate change in Nigeria. In the north, wind erosion has swept away houses and farms and intensified the effects of deforestation and drought. In the south, flash and seasonal flooding caused by climate change is threatening our cities. Urgent action is needed. 2 years ago, we passed the 2021 Climate Change Act, and plans have been announced for a carbon tax policy. But our economy remains dependent on oil and gas. And as we know, for most Nigerians, the problem is that they cannot afford to buy the fuel they need. This means action on climate must be combined and harmonized with economic development. In any case, we cannot do it alone. Climate change is a global issue, and there can only be a global solution, with the most developed countries taking responsibilities for having done most of the damage. Nevertheless, countries like Nigeria must be part of the global conversation and ensure that our voices are heard. These are just some of the issues our countries face today, and that we will discuss in more details over the course of the discourse. I'd like to thank our speakers for agreeing to participate, and for all of you joining the conversation. I am confident that we will leave this dialogue feeling enlightened and inspired. Thank you very much.
Many thanks to Aisha Babangida for such a wonderful, thought-provoking speech that instantly sets the tone for this conversation. We have four eminent Nigerians, 3 gentlemen and lady, who will be doing justice to our theme, new paradigm, new generation, and new ideas. In the next 2 hours, we're going to be exploring and exploiting, so many issues taken from different perspectives of these eminent Nigerians. To my immediate left is Professor Anthony Killer. Professor Killer is a Jean Monnet Professor of Strategy and Development. He's the Director of Studies at the European Center of Advanced and Professional Studies. He's a regular face, on television, on BBC. He's a columnist. He studied at Cambridge. He has first-class degree in post science. He has taught in various colleges and universities in Cambridge, Ipswich, Leeds, London, and so many other places. He's a management consultant of repute. Professor Killer, thank you for honoring our invitation to be part of this discourse.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Next to Professor Killer is our lady in the house, Mariamu Aminu, works at Access Holdings Limited, where she supports the group managing director in providing strategic leadership and oversight to the organization. She has worked in the Government Affairs Department at IHS Towers, the largest telecoms infrastructure company in Nigeria. She was an associate director of external relations and public advocacy at the Tony Elumelu Foundation. She spent 15 years of her postgraduate studies in working at the Global Human Rights and U.S.-Africa Policy in the United States of America, Assistant Director of U.S. Government Relations at the One Campaign, and a legislative aide to the chairman of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs in the U.S. House of Reps. Mariamu Aminu comes to this discussion with a rich background of knowledge, intellect on global human rights affairs. Has a background in international relations and politics from the University of Wales. Mariamu Aminu, we're glad to have you here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, to my right is a young man who is bubbling with ideas. At some point, he contested President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria because he felt that there's been too much of recycling, so he needed to breathe a fresh air into the political landscape. And he contested at the Sustainable National Party, SNP. At that time, he represented the Gen Z, those who are the rave of the moment, the youth who actually want a different kind of leadership in the country. Ahmed Buhari is a versatile Nigerian who has so much experience in so many fields. He's a geologist. He's got master's degree in geographic information system. He's a data analyst. He's ex-this, ex-that, international trade consultant. He has MBA in data sciences. He's a public relations officer. In fact, he's a polyglot, just to make it simpler. Ahmed Buhari, welcome to this wonderful event. And we hope that Nigerians and our listeners and viewers will gain from your rich resource on issues that we're going to be discussing and looking at.
Thank you.
And the last but not the least on our list of guests is Dr. Tokwe Fasua. Fasua has PhD in economics, a chartered accountant, public policy scholar with over 30 years experience in banking, management, consulting, and research work. He's the CEO of Global Analytics Consulting and President Institute for Service Excellence and Good Governance. He too also contested president in 2019 as the presidential candidate of Abundant Nigerian Renewal Party, ANRP. And he felt that he had all the qualifications to be president of this country, at least to fit into the paradigm shift in terms of our leadership evolution. Tokwe Fasua, we are glad to have you here, and we thank you for honoring our invitation at very short notice.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, gentlemen and lady, you see, let's get to the business of the day. Let's look at the man, IBB. He's 82 years today. Let me start from you, Professor Killer. What kind of impression comes to mind when you hear about IBB?
Well, let me start by wishing IBB, a personal happy birthday, and to know that in times we live, being 82 is a blessing, and being there mentally and physically fit is something we all hope for ourselves. And knowing fully well we're not all going to get it, but it's good to celebrate those who have achieved it. In your introduction, you used the word enigma twice. There's a general tendency in Nigeria to misuse that word, enigma. I think in the Nigerian lexicon, there's a tendency to confuse it with greatness. In the case of IBB, he's a true enigma. He's one of those people who are exactly what an enigma is, in the sense that very visible, yet not easy to understand. He's a man who has survived attempts, full of thoughts, and he moves in a way that always surprises people till the end. I think he keeps his strategy to his heart, and he plays with tactics. Students of strategies will understand the difference between strategy and tactics, and IBB is a good example of that. For me, it's also a very Nigerian story. full of potentials, full of ideas, full of possibility, and yet fraught with everything Nigerian. To the extent that on paper, IBB, with its vision and idea, could have moved Nigeria beyond Singapore. But for some reason, in reality, it never really happened, for a lot of reasons. And IBB symbolizes for me that fact that the present of Nigeria is not heavily impacted by the potential past. So we have that kind of paradox in him. But more importantly, of all Nigerian leaders, at least of modern Nigeria, there are two Nigerians who have paid more attention to human development than material resources. And those two people are IBB and Obafemi Awolowo. It's one of the things that distinguish them amongst other people, because whilst other people talk about things to do, they sort of focus more on people. IBB is the man who turned Nigeria to a workshop of ideas and debates, of dialogue. He's the man who first had the idea of going to the, as it were, the hornet's nest of intellectuals to say, let me contest with your ideas. And I think, it's a great thing. And I commend, in view of that, the organizers of these events on the idea to let ideas speak up and confront each other, with the hope and the recommendation that the idea turns to humanity, go beyond Nigeria, go African and become global, especially because of the theme of the day.
Thank you very much, Professor Kira. Mariam, can we have your opening shots? Looking at the man IBB, he's 82 years today.
Thank you again for having us, and thank you to the IBB and Mariam Foundation and the family for creating this annual forum where we can review and reflect on what was a very consequential presidency that has done much to shape the country that we are today and where we're going in the future. I think I was a child when he was president and then a teen, so this is a great opportunity for me to look back as well and learn. I think the first things that jump out to you relating to President Babangida was his relentless optimism and strong leadership. Nobody was ever confused about who was in charge. He also had a very powerful, formidable partner in his wife, Mariam Babangida. She came to slay every time, not just in her fashion choices, but in policy. She was an unapologetic champion of women at a time when there were few women on the world stage, and she went right to the bottom of the pyramid and demanded a better life for rural women. That led to the creation of the Ministry of Women Affairs, where the president then effectively, for the first time, gave women a seat at the Federal Executive Council table. Another feature of his administration, his legacy, is our penchant for technocrats. Everybody looks at the ministerial list of every new president now looking for technocrats. Why? Because even though he ran a military regime, he stacked it with technocrats. We all remember Professor Olukoya Ransom-Kuti, the father of our primary healthcare system, which the WHO then replicated in multiple countries. My own father, Jibril Aminu, participated in that administration, and it was during that time that the opening up of the upstream section of our oil and gas industry was a deliberate policy to homegrown owners and producers. It was mostly multinationals before. For the first time, and today we have owners very well known, and these companies are listed on the stock exchange, where we can then, the rest of the country can also participate in this generation of wealth from our own natural resource. In terms of decrees and policies, he is the father of the Bank and Financial Institutions Act, which unleashed a new generation of financial institutions that today are multinational companies rolling out across the continent and in global financial centers. And also helped to unleash the next generation we're seeing, which are fintechs. When it comes to ICT and education, he's the first president to roll out computing in schools, ICT education, and amended the Education Act to allow private institutions. These institutions are now at the foremost of training our tech entrepreneurs, both in the financial spaces and other spaces. And we'll keep watching this space. On security, he started nomadic education, which we complained about then, but right now we can see the impact on our security. He created the NDLEA, he created the National Intelligence Agency, and he created the DSS. If you don't know them, it's because you don't need them, but they exist. He is the father of CAMA, the Company Allied Matters Act. He created the People's Bank, which effectively rolled out microfinance for the poorest amongst us. Today, 63% of Nigerians, a conservative number, are poor. There is much he gave us to build on. And then lastly, I will talk about infrastructurally. He not only extended the third mainland bridge, which was started by President Gowon, but he pretty much built this capital. If you want to complain about the government, you want to complain about Abuja, it's because IBB built it. So you're welcome to come in and cooperate. And lastly, very lastly, very important, he drove ECOWAS to convert itself from an economic organization to transform itself into a political organization, raise an army, and restabilize Liberia and Sierra Leone. Otherwise, we would not have a West Africa region to speak of today. The humanitarian disaster was
that's quite a loaded.
Yes, quite a legacy.
Quite a loaded legacy. So you have just given us in just 2 minutes. Thank you very much, Mariam. Let me hear from you, Ahmed Buhari.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. First of all, I would like to say happy birthday to the People's General. I first saw him about 37 years ago in person. I was a young boy in primary school when he came to our school, and for me, very few men could actually catch my attention. When I saw my dad standing, and next to him was my uncle, Kanesan Bello, retired, and IBB was there, and all of a sudden, all the shine was emanating from IBB, and I was like, who is this man? And as a young boy on the rows of all of the lines that we had made to welcome him, I stood there and I was like, wow, I just want to be like this guy in future. And we went across the lines, shook our hands, and many years later, 37 years later, he's still glowing. He still stands out. He's still mentally fit. He's still agile. He has one of the most incredible ability to remember things that have happened in the past, you know, and never forgets a name, never forget where you left the last conversation. And, you know, while I was young then, looking through newspapers on his regime, I know and I can remember very well that there was a lot of criticisms about his governance structure. It did seem as if though some people who knew that it could never be military presidents wanted a democracy to come so that they could get an opportunity. Having said all of that, I think Mariam really captured a lot of the achievements that he made during his time, and no doubt we're still looking for that one president that will surpass the achievements of General Babangida. Happy birthday, sir.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. That's a very lovely way to put it. Recalling fond memories, you know, when you were a child. And now growing up to also aspire to preside over the country.
It's unbelievable that not in my wildest dream did I ever think that I would be called to actually speak about the man that I so much admire.
Wow, that's great. Tokwe Fasua, I know you've been itching to say something, so let's hear from you.
Thank you very much, and of course I'd like to start by wishing the President General a happy 82nd birthday. If I may go down the routes of what Ahmed B just said, I also met the General once here in Abuja, maybe sometime in 2002 or thereabout. They came to open the Yakubu Gowon Center. And you know, in about the space of 2 seconds, he left an impression on me by the impeccable English he spoke. And I was like, this is supposed to be an old man, you know. The accent was on point, you know. Call it Queen's English, call it whatever, you know. And, of course, it's someone that you love him or hate him, because I'm from the Southwest, and when General IBB was around, the Southwest was the fulcrum of criticisms for obvious reasons. But to love him or hate him, you can't ignore IBB. And of course, as Professor Killer said, I mean, he set some standards while he was around. He brought intellectualism into government, which is a paradox, because we've seen that in civilian times, there seems to be less tolerance for intellectual discourse and debate. And so if IBB was to bring in IMF loan, for example, he allowed everybody to fulminate about it. We were arguing, those who were in universities were arguing about it, even though if at the end of the day he's going to do what he will do, but he allowed you to vent. And I think that's psychological. It's about social psychology, understanding that people need to release, okay, that energy. And I mean, if we came from a military government, that is very, very, if you like, that's, it's a big example to civilian government as well. If he was talking about devaluing the Naira, and of course, I did disagree, I must say. At that point in time, maybe I was barely 15, 16 years old, the Naira, because I was the one that bought newspapers from my dad and all of that stuff, so I read it on the way home, from the junction. So I did disagree, and of course I was swayed by the arguments in the Sketch and Tribune and Guardian that was around then and so on. But it let people vent and discuss. And I think what we probably are not noticing is that there could have been an increase in intellectual capability and the average IQs of Nigeria in that time, as against trying to suppress it. You're better off trying to let the people, because they're going to also get ideas from everywhere. And of course, IBB also picked some of the best people around, Professor Julius, I think, some very important people, try to work with Tai Sholari and all of that, It showed that, look, as well, exactly, in FRSC, road safety. It showed that the uniform is not meant to scare people off. Funny enough, I went to an army school as well, growing up, secondary school. So in the barracks then, from time to time, some of these generals would come. I think he may have come to Ondo State at that point in time where I went to school. I remember Buhari came, I remember Abacha came, even before the 1983 coup. And I lived in Akure where there was a problem in the politics. And there was a day, in fact, it was yesterday they marked it, August 16, when the town kind of went into flames. And, prominent politicians were burned down, physically. Their houses burned, sometimes their families burned, and so on, until that election, that coup in 1983. So if you would talk about IBB, you'll talk about being cerebral, charming, nobody can take that away. Savvy, quick on his feet. You're always thinking on his feet. And of course, if you like, you say ideological, and that's where I'll end it. President IBB believed it was a bit on the right in terms of economic thinking, and he was unapologetic about it. So he's not the kind, he didn't quite subscribe to the socialist hue at that point in time. He has his pluses and minuses, but if you look at the trajectory of the world till date, you see that maybe perhaps he was on the very right track. And I think he had profound impact on this country. So once again, happy birthday to the General.
Thank you very much, Tokwe. I think you've just, people are looking at him from different perspectives, and that also, represents the kind of polyglot that he is. He's a man of many parts, and like Prof said earlier, the more you try to understudy him, the more complex he becomes. And that is where he draws his enigmatic characteristic from, We need to take a break now, and when we come back, we will continue to interrogate the issues, marrying the past with the present with a view to creating and improving a better future, because this nation has come to stay. And our viewers may also want to know that IBB Legacy Dialogue is a non-partisan organization. We are apolitical. We are not sharing the sentiments of anyone. We are only creating a platform for interrogating issues of contemporary relevance in the country. And in the process of this exchange of ideas, opinion leaders, policy formulators can also take ideas from this our discourse to enrich the body of knowledge. Thank you very much. When we come back, we'll start looking at other aspects of this subject matter. Well, welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. We've been looking at the issue of new paradigms, new generation, and new ideas to mark IBB's 82nd birthday. And this time, let me come to our lady guests, the only lady in the house. We still have all our guests here present: Ahmed Buhari, Tokwe Fasua, Professor Anthony Killer, and Mariamu Aminu. Let's look at this concept of new paradigms. You know, from 1960 to date, government after government will keep complaining. The people keep complaining. Oh, but each time a government goes and another one comes, you say, good old days. But yet they still keep complaining. And so what exactly is the problem? Is it that of leadership or that of followership, or a combination of both?
Okay. Well, thank you for that question. I think so. It's human nature to continue to take time to reflect. I think there is an old mythical quote that was attributed to either Chairman Mao or of China or Premier Zhu Enlao. And the question was, what was the impact of the French Revolution of 1789? And the response was, it is still too soon to say. I think because history is a living thing, we keep looking back and seeing things in the past, and things look rosier. Now, it is a reflection of the time. It means that there are difficulties that people believe were easier, but also history is a living thing, and often we don't really see the impact of things that happen at the time that they happened until much later we begin to see that. And I'm going to tie that into the theme of today, which is new paradigms. I'm thinking paradigm is not really a singular paradigm we're living in. It depends what you're looking at. So I would argue that you can see very clearly right now there are four paradigms. There's the digital paradigm, and if you look at the roots of that, the good old days you were talking about, when President Babangida created the NCC, and that's the Nigerian Communications Commission and the Nigerian Broadcast Commission. Oddly enough, while it was a military regime and we associate that with authoritarianism, you could see him opening up the space. They call it liberalization. He was constantly opening up the space. Dr. Fasua alluded to him being center-right. And it is because he created the National Broadcast Commission, opened up the space to private ownership, that we're actually sitting today in the Africa Independent Television studio. In the digital space, you could see, again, the creation of the Communications Commission, which increased access to telecommunications and gave rise to the Telecommunications Act, has taken us forward. If you combine that with the reforms in the financial sector that he did, that's how we arrived at fintechs. Financial sector reform with these giants that are now converting to fintechs. Fintechs, the reason they exist is to reduce barriers to entry into those sectors, and you're looking at increased access to financial services, which is necessary for fighting poverty and solving a multitude of business issues, particularly those related to SMEs. Now, what we're seeing on account of this new paradigm is we're looking at new jobs, we're looking at flexi work. During COVID, we had continuity of government, continuity of business. It's helping to transform education. You're hearing now health tech, ed tech, ag tech, everything tech. We can't associate everything with that. But we still got 40% of the population that are not, that are excluded financially, that the digital age will help. We do need to also be careful of certain risks and consequences that come with this new paradigm. We're looking at AI. AI does learn and does improve many of the things we do. At the same time, the built-in biases of the original makers continue to replicate and expand, and we need to be careful. We need to be careful of fake news, spreading of internet hate, bullying, spread of corruption and crime, and of course sowing the seeds of discourse. So these are all, so we have benefits and there are risks to even the digital paradigm. We're also living in the paradigm or age of sustainability. If you recall the Millennium Development Goals of 2000, there were 8 targets for poor countries to develop. Well, now we're in 2023, we're living the age or paradigm of sustainability. Everybody's got a target. There are those for developing countries, there are those for the developed countries. We've all come to this mutual end of our denial and understanding that the world is not an infinite resource. And we are stewards of it, and both for ourselves and for generations unborn, and we're not entitled to burn it off. Otherwise, we will suffer, our children will suffer, our grandchildren will really suffer. So we're looking at now what's happening in governance and in business. In the business sector, you're seeing CSR is no longer just about giving, it's about how you operate your business. What impact do you have on climate? It's about what investments you make. And how they affect, again, the fragile earth and the other people in it. It's about, it's also, so it's your operations, your investments, it's about your giving, and it's about how we consume as well. Consumers also have a target. So we're living in an age of consciousness, which is good. On the downside, we want to be careful that developed countries don't, again, railroad Africa into giving up development aspirations in the interest of reducing energy. Africa uses up less than, or creates less than 3% of the pollution and uses up very little energy relative to the rest of the world. We should not allow ourselves to curtail our development aspirations in order to allow because the developed countries used up more than their fair share. So those are very important things to keep in mind. We might have been able to leapfrog over things like telephone networks, landlines, but we're not going to leap over the need for incubators. And sometimes asking us to wait for new clean technology is asking us to wait. Our babies cannot wait. Our young people who are doing homework at night that don't have power cannot wait. And we must stand very strong and take certain liberties and grow our economies while the developed countries cut their energy consumptions. And also later on, I'll talk about a couple of other paradigms as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mariam. I think you just hit the nail on the head because this new generation of Nigeria, almost everyone is in a hurry to get to see things being done. And the kind of patience that people exhibited those days, it's almost not existing now because they want to see results. The new generation are fast thinkers. They want to put their hand on the computer. They want to create an idea and all of that. Ahmed, let's dig into this further. At some point, you tried to contest for president of this country, and something was, running through your mind. Your party was even called Sustainability, National Party.
Right.
So, from what she said and the kind of ideas that need to be espoused at this point, artificial intelligence, emotional intelligence, and the fintech, sector, and all of that. How do we explore and exploit all of these opportunities to create a new narrative that will deepen democracy, deepen leadership in this country?
And hopefully deliver dividends of democracy.
Yes, exactly.
So I did hear a lot of the things Mariam said, and spot on. There are a whole lot of problems, and what does the future hold for us? How do we want to achieve all of those things? Guiding the fact that we're talking about new paradigms, new generation, new ideas, hopefully. And And then we go back to the fact that nearly everything that she has just talked about has been in existence, but with a different nomenclature, different name. So when you look at IBB's legacies and you x-ray it side by side, all of the things that governments have been talking about, especially in the last 10 years, they're just the same things. From the parastatals to the views of the parastatals and what they want to achieve and all of that. And I'm saying, what is the problem? How come with all these lofty ideas and understanding of where we want to go to, we are unable to reach the promised land, or at least it doesn't seem like we're headed towards the promised land, as it were? I think that regardless of who you bring as the executives or the legislature or the judiciary, which in most cases stay about 4 to 8 years, they still try as much as possible to implement all their views and their ideas through what I call the gatekeepers. Who are these gatekeepers? They are the civil service structure. And the civil service structure is there. People that work in the civil service are going to be there for about 35 years or at the age of 60, whichever comes first for them. And their role is to operate the space. The military is part of them, the police, the paramilitary, those in the ministries, and the MDAs. All of these people together are the people that are the gatekeepers. Now, how can we see that these ideas that keep coming every now and then, like the ones Mariam spoke about, will see the light of day if indeed the penetration through the civil service does not get us the implementation that we want? In many cases, the executives even send their, I call them school prefects, or class captains like ministers, I call them, and DGs, to go into the spaces and ensure that their vision sees the light of day. In most cases, because the civil service understands how to manipulate the space, they own the space, they've seen tougher people than you, you're going to still leave eventually, and they're going to meet the next person. So you see people like Okonjo-Iweala, you see Dora Akuili, they come with all the energy because they have succeeded all elsewhere, but they come into the space and they're struggling. In most cases, I will tell you this, ministers go on their knees to ask the PAMSECs, okay, sir, I am sorry, what do we do? And then, this woman was very good when she was at UN, or how come she's not able to perform? Because the system is stiff. And I think the question you asked Mariam was, how is it a followership problem or a leadership problem? And I'm looking at IBB's legacies in 8 years. It was just 8 years, backed with a lot of criticisms and so much achievements. What it means is, it doesn't matter whether it's Kaki, whether it's Agbada, it is the person. And most importantly, for these gatekeepers to be able to succeed, we must first of all move away from a salary incentive system that we are currently operating that is unable to meet with their daily needs. Gari is about 750 naira a mudu now. Beans is a no-go area. How do we even balance the nourishment for our children? How about we move from a salary incentive system to a welfare incentive system? Because the time we're going to be increasing the monies for these civil servants, salaries for these civil servants, the market woman will be like, okay, fine, me too, I'll move that guy from 750 to 3,500 naira. And then where are you? And this is just a 1% of the entire population who probably we think are doing well, and then the rest of us didn't actually move, but then we're feeling the brunt. I think that we must move to welfareism. And what is welfareism for gatekeepers? And I'm picking out gatekeepers because indeed, all of these lofty ideas would have to pass through them for implementation. How about we see that these gatekeepers have their housing sorted so that the day I get into the civil service, I'm paying for my housing, through my years in service. How about we ensure that their children go to government-run schools whereby they get to pay for their school fees subsidized throughout their years of service? How about we talk about healthcare? You go to ministries, you see poster, John Adamu, we need 200,000 naira for surgery, blah, 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 blah. And then you come back there next month, John Adamu obituary. The guy passed away eventually for 200,000 naira. Access to healthcare is even a problem for government staff. And then the last thing I'd like to talk about is, how about we talk about monies in your pocket, like tax rebates, like at the end of the year, after you've done all your shopping, you go and then you claim your taxes and get some extra money in your pocket. The reason why I'm bringing all of this is because if that government worker is sat down on that chair and you, a government contractor, brings a proposal for the renovation of a school, and you have kept it at XYZ amount of money, he will scrutinize it to make sure that that amount of money is not going to go to waste because his child goes to that school. But what you see right now is, Oga, this is just, I don't know, go and put 200,000, 200% markup on it. He doesn't care. His role there, like I call him, is a gatekeeper. He's supposed to defend, protect, minimize the wastage, but he is contributing to it. Because when he moved from Ekiti to Abuja, the only house he could afford was in Angwambiri, right? He was in Angwambiri, moving from Angwambiri to the office every day in the most difficult situations. Nobody cares whether it's rainy, nobody cares whether there's no fuel, he just has to get to the office. So at that point, he starts to think, what's going on? He gets married and he moves from Angwambiri to Angwandaji, even farther away. Every day he's coming to work, he's thinking, how am I going to defraud the system? That is all that's on his mind. His children, the guy at Sambisa Forest, the soldier there, he sat down there in Sambisa Forest. And then he calls his wife after 2 months when he gets an opportunity, and she's telling him that Junior has not been to school in 1 month because school fees has not been paid. That means his money has not even reached the wife yet. And then he's looking just 100 meters away, he can see Boko Haram lines, and he takes some of ammunition and say, look, take some ammunition, give me some money. He sends to his family. Patriotism has been lost. Morality has been lost. And all of these things have been lost because the people that are supposed to help us pass the message are unable to do so because they have not been taken care of. They feel left out.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. I think our viewers back home should also know that IBB became president of Nigeria at the age of 44. And he spent 8 years. He left office at the age of 52. And so quite a number of what he achieved, falls into that category of persons in a generation of ideas, even though often criticized, but we can speak to some of his achievements today. And from what the picture you have painted is like, what we need is a functional system.
That's what we need.
And taking inspiration from your welfareist, proposal.
Right, for the gatekeepers.
Yes, for the gatekeepers, which is also why a lot of corruption goes on out there.
Yes.
Because I've seen people, when you ask them questions, they tell you, we are stealing as to save for the rainy day.
Yes, because John Adamu, for example,
when they retire, they don't get to see anything because the state does not recognize whether you exist
feel they're part of
not.
I was going to give you an example, sir. Have you seen any minister complain about his salaries? Or have you seen any governor or anybody in government? They don't complain. The reason why they don't complain is because it is fine. They may not be getting allocation for some project they want to execute, but it is still fine because they feel they're carried along. Yeah. This is not the same for the civil service structure.
I remember that I took a course in the U.S. and Wisconsin on anti-corruption.
Right.
And one of our lecturers was telling us, I jailed my best friend, who was my best man at the wedding, for misappropriating $50,000. And those of us who came from Africa, but 6 of us, we were saying, wow, how could you have jailed your best friend for misappropriating 50? He said, yes, because my responsibility is to the state, not to him as a friend. And so I'm just looking at our sense of communalism in this part of the world, absolutely. Africans, whether that can also help us, combat issue of corruption. Because over here, such a person will not come back to the village. I'm sure they will chop off his neck. Over to you, Fasua. Before we introduce our virtual guests, we'll have Professor Usman Yusuf waiting to also shed light on us. But Fasua, let's look at it from the economic point of view. You are an economist. You've done a lot of researches and all of that. Why is it impossible, almost impossible for us to even have a defining, form of economy? Because you said IBB didn't, tilt towards the socialist economy. It was more or less like the capitalist economy and all of that. Even to today, our economy doesn't seem to have a form. What's the problem? Yes.
Thank you very much. Formless economy. Well, first of all, I think from a contemporary economic perspective, some of the isms that we're used to are dead, actually. United States is known as the most capitalist country in the world, but hey, they have a massive social security system, which even when Obama came, he had to also add Obamacare to it, which is a major issue, and they spend billions. And of course, they do a lot of subsidies even though if they come here, maybe from the IMF and World Bank, they tell you to take out your subsidies, but they're subsidizing agriculture massively, billions every year, and many other industry, and even protecting industry. If you went to China, there is supposed to be a socialist country run by one party, the CCP, or CCP, as it were. But China is actually one of the most capitalist countries today. You see a lot of Rolls Royce on the streets of Beijing now, Ferraris and what have you. What I think that means, and in fact, that was actually what my party stood for in 2019 when we ran, a sort of meshing of the two. Let's take the best ideas from both places. As it pertains to Nigeria, sometimes our economic paradigm and standing sort of moves with the leader, and of course that's to be expected. Because it's a loose system, so the leader that comes will foist his own ideas on the society, especially as far as the economy is concerned. But I think if we hark back to what IBB did, we'll see that it was also a combination of several of these ideologies. One of the very critical things that IBB did in this time was the establishment of what's called MAMSA, which is the mass mobilization, something like a long word anyway, for social and economic reform and all of that stuff. But what we found then was a lot of buzz among the youth, and people went to the villages, and a lot of young people were employed in MAMSA speaking to and actually propagating the ideas of government, which unfortunately we don't have anymore. It transformed into NOA and then went dead. Sort of went dead. So, but I want to quickly say something. When you asked the first question, I think from Mariamo, I wanted to say that part of the problems we have now is what is called cognitive bias, for example. The idea, and we're not interrogating these biases, these psychologies that's going on with our people, especially the younger generation. They are impatient and all of that. And of course, whereas they are now suffering from information overload, it must be said. In our time, you have to go to libraries to get some information that is now freely available on the internet these days. So the idea that yesterday is better than today, is it really? Okay? Was yesterday better than today? Would I want to live in 1912? Perhaps not. When there were no cars, no shoes, and all of that. You were there in the jungle. My grandmother used to tell me how they would lift loads to go and sell for 300 kilometers. Sometimes, I don't think I'd like to live. There was no antibiotics and what have you. Then, of course, the idea that abroad is better than here. We are sitting in the middle of a jackpot phenomenon now. Of course, it's a lot better when you get there in the initial time, you find a job, you're able to eat food, in Nigeria. But I think that this maybe 20 years, 25 years down the line, you are regretting, why did I leave my country? Your friends are running the country and all of that. You thought the country would break up. It refused to break up and all of that stuff. But I think all of this just says that we need to really think. One, you asked the question about the economic paradigm we're running. The truth is this: when we have our big meetings on the economy, maybe in the Hilton or somewhere, we never think about those small people in the economy. I would expand Ahmed Buhari's idea about the gatekeeper and the fact that the gatekeeper needs to live a certain existence that is a bit decent. I would expand it beyond the gatekeepers. I say, how does the artisan, do we think for the artisans? Those people that will work for you and you say, okay, you finish this work, you say, yes. How much is your money? You say, oh, guy, anything you have, give me. We're killing them. We go, we're pricing something by the roadside, we knock it down. The woman is selling them, maybe the old thing that she's carrying her head is not more than 5,000. You slash it down. And then you go to the big supermarkets around, and you pay premium times 500 for that same thing. We need to have that big discussion, okay? That's what I would suggest, and I see you need to go. What I would suggest is that, the debates about where we're taking our economy and our people to, because the whole idea is about the people. Where are we taking our people to? By now, we need to be evolving a new species of Nigerians, not those ones that we're leaving them in the lodge, nutrition they cannot find. Inflation is powering up on them. We're having big discussions on foreign exchange and foreign direct investment when the resources we need are in this country and we have refused to release it. We need that discussion to happen, okay? That where are we going? We need to incorporate those little people, the artisans, the informal economy. If we're able to pay 200,000 minimum wage in the federal civil service, and indeed, when they mentioned that amount, I was like, these guys, you can't be serious. Until I read one of the labor leaders said, look, as of 1980, the minimum wage in Nigeria was $250 per month. which is not a lot. But today now it is $30.
No, don't worry. I'll come back to you. Let me get the views of Professor Usman Yusuf, one of our virtual girls. Thank you, Professor, for joining us in this discussion. We are looking at the man IBB. Today, he marks 82 years. And we'll also look at some of his policy framework and some of his achievements vis-a-vis his leadership style and what obtains in present Nigeria. Prof, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Can you please give us an insight into our theme, our central theme, new paradigms, new generation, and new ideas? Taking inspiration from when Babangida was president for 8 years and marrying that with what obtains presently in our 24 years democracy.
Right, good. Thank you very much for the invitation, and hi to everybody. Let me start by a disclaimer. I'm a practical man. All this long English, I've lived through so much English. And I'm saying I've seen the best of Nigeria, my generation. Our generation owes a debt of gratitude to this country we can never repay. We have seen the best of this country. Some of that time, IBB was the president, much maligned as he was during his time. But we now look back with
hindsight.
We now look back and said things were better then than they are today. So, and we lift our hand each time we pray and pray to our departed parents and some of these leaders that invested in us, not in themselves and their families. And that's why we're able to be productive citizens that we are today. I have lived longer in the United States than I've lived in Nigeria, my life. I've lived in Judeo-Christian culture longer than I've lived in my culture here. When I came back home, out there, your religion or your color in the field I work is not important. It's what you could contribute. Okay. When I came back home, what did I see? It's not the Nigeria I left. Churches are bigger. Mosques are bigger. Prayers are louder. Churches are fuller. But the fear of God is much less than when I left it. Right? Right. So all this long English, wherever I went in the world, my heart has always been home. Because this is where I love the loudest and the most genuine of laughters. And I see the promise in this country. And I tell my children too. Nobody is coming to solve our problems but us. Long English will not solve our problems, but look at practicality of what's happening. So I came and I got into the NHIS. My fight in the NHIS is public. That was my first baptism of fire with Nigerian civil service. People are not ready to work for this country. This is the truth. The first advice I got from the PAMSEC of when I went to visit her was, she wants to advise me that Nigeria, working in Nigeria is working for oneself first. You fill your pocket, you fill your account before working for this country. On that, when I came out, I asked my brother, what does this woman mean? He laughed. So I knew from that day I was going to have a problem. So this is the Nigeria we met, and this is the mindset. So we can go around and round and round and round. The twin problems of this country are two: corruption and bad governance. Corruption and bad governance. Corruption and bad governance. Corruption and bad governance. During our time, there is no society, there is no corruption. But there was enough money, enough soul in the heart of our leaders to educate us, to fix our schools, to fix our hospitals, to fix our roads, to fix other infrastructure. I went into the world, and many of my generation went into the world. We practiced in some of the best centers in the world and competed favorably from the village primary schools and secondary schools we left. Today, all across this country, from the richest state, Lagos, Rivers, whatever, go to their public hospitals, go to their schools, primary and secondary schools, and compare them to what they were then. Prof, so let's be real.
Prof, can you hear me?
Yeah?
Yes, you have
I
to
can.
stay. You have to stay on. We want to go for a short break, and when we come back, we'll take this discussion further. We'll also look at the role
Good.
of religion in our politics, in our democracy, because Nigeria is becoming a hotbed of religious politics and so many other issues. Essentially, what we crave for is a good government, it's a good country where the systems work, where the welfare of the people is catered for, and so that in the final analysis, we can truly say that, yes, this is our country. Too many prayers. The churches have expanded, the mosques have expanded, yet only 1% of prayers answered, kind of. That's the scenario that Prof just painted. Such a paradox. Thank you, and when we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Thank you for being with us. It's been an interesting edition. It's been a potpourri of ideas, cross-pollination of ideas. People are ventilating the issues and trying to offer solutions of what obtains in the polity, how we can deepen our democracy, how we can also promote good governance and what have you. I don't know if Prof is still with us, Professor Usman Yusuf.
Yes, I am.
You painted a very pathetic picture in your response to my earlier question, but I don't think all is hopeless in the country. As an elder statesman that you are, as an intellectual, as a scholar, what will you be, advancing, even though you got your baptismal of fire, according to you, where you were appointed as Executive Secretary of NHIS. But what will you be advancing for the new generation of Nigerians as a way to promote good governance in the interest of our nation?
Right. I mean, during my generation, we had elders to look up to. But the young generations, I feel sorry for them. Who are they going to look up to? The ministers that and that's why we hang around. Our leaders, which of our leaders do they look up to? Yeah. So the honest truth is we as elders, and I and Shegumi went into the forest in 8 northern states to see these bad guys. And the lesson we've learned all through is all across the 6 geopolitical zones, elders have lost control of their youth. That's why Fulani youth are bandits. Kanuri youths are IPOB. Igbo youths that did not see the civil war want to break up this country. And in the southwest and south too. So we as elders, we have relinquished our responsibility and allowed this space to be taken over by this kid. Largely, it's our responsibility the way the nation is turning out because we've not done well for them. Elders of our time did well for us. How about us? Everybody is grabbing and putting things in his pocket. When there are 20 million out-of-school children, when there are guns all over the place, when there is so much unemployment, when there is so much corruption, and how do you expect our kids to look up to us? They want to japa. Everybody is japaing. Everybody is jackpotting, and we are blaming them. We've not shown them good example. We've not treated them well. We have not done as our elders did to us. So the first thing I'll say, we need to do better. And those that are saddled with the responsibility of leadership need to, every one of them, swear with their holy book that they are going to be good custodians of our people's commonwealth. Every one of them, with their Bibles or their Quran. And in the end, what do you see? In the end, what do you see? So it's a country of deception by elders. The youth are pushed to the wall. Those that have option leave the country. Those that don't become bandits, become Boko Haram, become IPOB ESN, or become Yahoo boys. And we are surprised. So we must take back our responsibility as elders and show them good example, like elders before us during IBB time. And those leaders before him showed the way for us to be better citizens. So
thank you very much, Prof.
I'm throwing the thing back to us.
Prof, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can.
Okay,
Thank
still hang on. We want to bring in another of our virtual guests, former Minister for Aviation and former Corps Marshal of the Federal Road Safety Corps, Osita Chidoka. Incidentally, Federal Road Safety Corps was one of the institutions that was established by former President Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida. Osita, good afternoon. Can you hear us?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm in the house.
Okay, thank you for joining us, and we're discussing. We're looking at the issues of new paradigms, new generation, and new ideas. You were Corps Marshal of the Federal Road Safety Corps at a very young age. You've garnered a lot of experience in public service. We want to have your take, because the picture that Professor Usman Yusuf painted is that of a very pathetic one. I believe that there's still hope in this country. Do you share that sentiment?
Well, of course, there is hope. There is hope. Every generation have always complained about how the next generation is not able to take the banner of the, to fly the banner of succession. But there is hope. The only problem with the hope is the nature of what we are doing today and the timeline to benefit from that hope. So if you are planning that you want to have palm trees to start fruiting to make palm oil, you need to plant the palm tree now. But if you are planting corn and expecting to be able to get palm oil out of it, then you are just extended the time for the palm fruit to come. So what happens is that when you harvest the corn, then you will go back and still plant the palm tree. So where we are now is that what IBB did, and it's just unbelievable, it's amazing, that at 44, in 1985, without the technologies of today, without the information of today, I'm still just amazed what I was thinking at 44. He took over a government that was similar to what President Tinubu just took over now. A rundown government by the same General Buhari, who has a history of doing nothing with power, who has a history of damaging everything that is available in power. Now, Babangida took over from him. The first thing he did was he said to the country, we don't have money. Our money has been taken. Should we borrow from IMF or not? So the country sat, and after all the talk around the country, the consensus was that we should not borrow, but that we should accept the IMF conditionalities. Now, fast forward to 2023, the country have the same problem. Buhari left us with no money. Our foreign reserves that we have been showing us 30-something billion has turned out to be loans taken from international banks and placed in our foreign reserves. Our debt profile is such that we cannot, the 98% of our revenue is what we're using to service debts. Our fuel subsidy regime is consuming so much money that NNPC was not bringing in any dollars to the government. So the day Tinubu took over was like the day Babangida took over. Whether we should take IMF money or not, whether we should take the conditionalities. So he said, we will take the conditionalities, but we need to find out how to make the economy work. So do you know what he did? He went to the World Bank and got a man called Kalu Idikakalo, who worked with the IMF in the World Bank in Korea when they were going through the same process. He went to the same World Bank and got Chu SPO Kongu, one of the finest economists I have ever met in my life. Chu SPO Kongu, who was the Commissioner for Finance in East Central State after the Civil War. East Central State had the fastest recovery because of Chu Okongu's vision. So he got these two people. He didn't stop at that. He got Olikoye Ransom Kuti to go to the health sector. So he knew that we were in an existential crisis. It wasn't time to reward his generals who fought the war with him. It was time to solve the problem of a country. Now, he didn't stop that. What did our president do in 2023? He accepted the Article 4 consultation of the IMF, that is the word conditionalities, remove fuel subsidy, unify the Naira, deregulate the economy. Our president today accepted it, but without a backup plan on how to do it, without a cabinet on how to look through the social and human issues that will arise from this. Because in that Article 4 consultation of the IMF, they warned that doing these things will lead to dislocation in the economy in the immediate term. They warned. So now that we're looking at IBB, you could see the genius of finding a QSPO Congo, of finding a Kalu Idikakalo, bringing them together with the Olikoye Ransom Kutis. Look, he also brought a man called Professor Jubrin Aminu, who was AUC Executive Secretary and who had a distinction in medicine from University of Ibadan. This is the quality of people he brought together. He also brought us Professor Tamuno David West to the petroleum industry. So you could see that the first thing you do, learning the IBB script, is to find the team that will do it. But he didn't stop at that. After finding the team, he talked about removing the gridlock in the economy. So he started the liberalization and privatization program. I say it every time. GT Bank is one of the biggest banks in Africa today with over 2 trillion, 1.something trillion in assets. That bank was started by 5 million naira in 1990 when Babangida gave the licenses for people to start banks. The vision of liberalizing the economy is the Zenith Bank we have today, the UBA we have today. The last point I want to make,
yes,
and which is the most fundamental if we need to go, somebody talked about the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
For us to be able to find the gatekeepers now and save them, we need to go back to the Phillips Commission of the Babangida era. That Phillips Commission was a review of the civil service. Yeah. And they came up with the idea that the old system of admin officers is now obsolete. That we should have a system that people will work in a ministry, grow in that ministry, and get to the pinnacle of that ministry. That directors were the ultimate pinnacle, and that the PAMSEX were an appointment by the government. Yeah. We can tweak it and modernize it, but we need to go back to the Phillips recommendation. We need to go back there. The civil service we have today is dysfunctional, is dead, is incapable of moving Nigeria 1 inch forward. We need to reprofessionalize the civil service. We need to put back a recruitment, an appointment and promotion process that is not in the Federal Civil Service Commission, will appoint and discipline, and the ministries cannot do the work. So I think that 2 things I leave away from here is we need to look back at the IBB way of solving an existential economic crisis. And we need to look at the reforms of the civil service to see whether we can begin to rebuild. That is where I anchor my hope. That hope is that we begin the journey now.
Thank you, Osita Chidoka. We'll still have opportunity to have you in this discussion. That was very illuminating when you said Philip Commission. You were talking about Philip Asiodu, one of the very solid PAMSECs, super PAMSEC of those days. And there was a reason why they called them super PAMSEC during Yakubu Gowon and all that. Prof, let's come to the issues. Chokwe was making the point, and including Professor Usman Yusuf, they were making the point about the situation with Nigeria and all of that. I'm just looking at it that Nigeria, there's too much complain. It's like a country of sins, but no sinners. Such kind of paradox and all that. Looking at our economy, because it's a major issue, in our contemporary discourse. How would you, what would be your own, take-home points with respect to how to recover the country, and put it on a stronger pedestal, economic-wise? People ask for subsidy removal. Now the president removed subsidy. They say he shouldn't have removed subsidy, he should have waited to give palliatives. There is nothing you will not hear. So please, as a professor who is so grounded in economics, please tell us, what do you think will have been the ideal situation to help, recover this country, on a strong economic pedestal?
Let me start from the point you asked about the kind of economy we run.
Yes.
I think before most parts of the world, Nigeria has always been a mixed economy. I mean, we're natural traders, we're natural entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I laugh when I see people saying they should be teaching entrepreneurs in school. You can teach Nigeria management, to be specific, but we don't need to be inspired to be entrepreneurs. Every office you go to, everywhere you go to, somebody's having one side hustle. It is our nature to be that way. Well, and unfortunately, we've not tapped into that. Our problem is that whilst our people are creative, productive, and entrepreneurial, the biggest demand, the biggest force is the state. I argue that in Nigeria, the problem we have is that the state is too present in our life, and we need to roll back the state a little. Whilst the state can encourage and reward behavior as an idea, the good state will drive individuals, private enterprise, to make things happen. The other point I want to make is this, and that's to the economy, but there's a general point. You say Nigeria is a country of complaint and sinners without sin. Well, let's be careful. Progress and prosperity comes out of being disgruntled with the status quo. It is because we're not happy with where you are that you argue and then you try to improve it. Our problem in Nigeria, I believe, is that we've created a society where the rich and the famous, those who have fortune and fame, are not known for solutions. So we have a country where, you say elsewhere in the world, Hoover, Knorr, Bill Gates today, you know what they've brought to humanity. You can calculate the source of their fund because you see that for every app you sell, this is the amount you get.
There's a trajectory.
And if you did not invent that app, we would not have this. So we have a country where the rich and famous have no essential values. We cannot see, and I want our viewers to think about it. Think about the people who are rich and famous in Nigeria, and tell me the ones you can say that without them, we wouldn't have this. That is an underlying problem in our economy. And we need to solve that because at the moment, we have people who are making fame out of fortune out of privilege and chaos rather than providing solution. And that takes me to Professor Usman Yusuf. Somebody I know personally, and I know how cultured and refining is. We have to be careful to make statements like saying that I'm not for grammar. It's a very dangerous statement, Prof, because the capacity to think and articulate your thoughts is the origin of progress and prosperity. The essence of Homo sapiens is to be able to think and articulate its thoughts. And that is why you need poetry and art. No society grows. I dare viewers to show me any society, any country that has grown, that does not respect arts, reading, poetry, thought, abstract philosophy. Everything we do comes from that. So when we say we're pragmatic, let's not do too much grammar, we're not helping the new generation because we're creating people who think thinking is a burden, being articulate is an unnecessary tool. That, I understand Professor Yusuf Usman does not believe that, but I think he sent that message, and we need to curb it. Because, you see, part of the problem we have, humanity and Nigeria in particular, is that we look at consequence, not sequence. There are many intangible problems that we have that we've not dealt with, and we grapple with the consequence of that. So in Nigeria, for example, the state was created in 1914. We got independence in 1960. We have created a state, but we've not created a nation. Most countries in the world, they take their time to create a nation. The leadership of Nigeria has not been able to create a nation, i.e. a nation that has a Nigerian identity. The founding fathers in 1960 till they were abrupted in 66 tried to build a diverse nation in which regions were going on their pace. With the interruption of that, there came a moment in which we say, let's just form one Nigeria, unitary state, and it became the Nigerian thing. In 1985, from 1984 to 85, there's an administration that came that tried to redesign the country. All this talk of MAMSA that became NOA, all this idea of general conversation is a big architectural plan to say, let us refix Nigeria. You see, so far, most other administrations in the country, most other leadership, have not thought of, let us create a modern state. And I pause by one thing to say again, talking of sequence and consequence. You see, the world changed. People talk of the digital age, which is fantastic. The world changed, you know when? When they invented Polaroid camera. We don't look at that, but that is the big point. That is the big revolution in humanity, in which rather than wait for 2-3 days, you can take your picture immediately.
Right, real time.
Real time. That is when the new Homo sapiens became impatient and started to see things differently. So if we talk about the shift in paradigm and we want to look at that, we have to realize that we're dealing with a new set of people. Let me break people's hearts moving forward. There is no room for elders anymore, whether we like it or not. It is a knowledge-based world. Google can take you more than your father. The reason why our children converse with us is out of love, not because they really need us. And until we understand that, we're still going to be getting it wrong. And that is why we're going to struggle to build a society of the future that is value-led. The society of the future is function and reward-led. And I stop with that.
Thank you very much, Prof. You see, the issues are endless. We keep, discussing, judging, and interrogating scenarios and try and see how we can come out stronger. I keep talking about building a strong pedestal for which countries or nations can advance. And you made mention of a very serious issue, talking about the youth generation, the digital age, and what they can get right on Google. It's like taking over the role of parents. Absolutely. If you don't grab the kid, you might not necessarily have him or her. And so, Ahmed, let's look, look further into this. Let's probe a little bit more. Two speakers have mentioned your gatekeeping kind of scenario.
Yes.
So now, here is a country. Prof has given a lot of illumination. Professor Usman Yusuf, the same thing, Osita Chidoka and all of that. But there is still hope. And so I want us to, see how we can further farm on that hope. Because, like I tell people, when a country becomes hopeless, when there is no concern for the sub-nationalities, when there are no deliberate attempts to build a nation that binds you together, then you are likely going to have a state of anarchy.
Right.
But we're in a democracy, which offers platform for people to interrogate issues, ventilate your anger, and come up with a stronger solution. So what are your thoughts?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think Professor Usman didn't quite mean that we're speaking too much English.
No, that was just a comment.
I think it was more about, let's just hit the nail on the head and talk about the real issues and see if we can, from all of that conversation, find the solutions. And I like the fact that you put him on the spot to ask him, how do we resolve the two things he mentioned, corruption and the yearning for good governance? The yearning for good governance. And I didn't really get that from him. And this is what my generation is worried about. I meet IBB and I leave the room with knowledge. I leave the room with hope. I leave the room with belief, you know, and we have slowly degraded from those kind of leaders and elders to the leaders and elders that expect you to hold on to, rather than hold on to loyalty and mutual respect, they're now holding on to psychophancy and eye service.
Eye service syndrome.
It's so sad. And so this generation is slowly detaching from the elders because they do not feel anything that is value coming from them. For us to have the society that we are looking for, communication is essential. And that is why, I'm sorry to say this, but the last 8 years didn't quite give us that feel of a communicating administration that would talk to us, that would tell us this is where we're heading to. A shepherd and his sheep are always together because they listen to him, they understand him, even if they're going to cross through the river. Even if there's a hole that they will have to fall into and then jump out of, they do that. So what we are asking for right now is for us to get this good governance, governance has got to be moved from the top to the local government level. We have to give the local government autonomy. The local government chairman, I remember in 1992 when IBB had civilian governors and local government chairmen, they were so relevant because we knew the powers that were bestowed upon them. And the expectations from the community was so glaring that those local government chairman had no place to hide. And so becoming a local government chairman then was like becoming the president of that community. Now, local government chairmen are now bootlickers who seek the favor of their governor. So you heard this local government chairman got 5 million naira last month, the other one got 1 million naira because he's not a good boy. Now, these are the problems. And so those local things that are supposed to be taken care of, like farm produce, remember DFRI was under General Babangida as well, the Directorate for Food and Federal Road. If that was still until today, we won't have access roads to the markets anymore. You know, if that was still there, for the point of departure of all of these products, we'll be talking about building factories that will do the full processing of all of this farm produce. But it's not happening. Local government autonomy has got to come back. We have to go to give them responsibility. And what are our traditional rulers doing? They were so relevant. All the crises that we had locally then, they resolved them at the palace. In fact, even if you were cheated, all the emir needs to do was to tell you sorry, and it ends there. Now they've been so detached from power, from relevance, that they're just sitting there collecting salary. I believe, sir, that for us to have the local government, for us to have the system that's working, our value systems have to come back. Our values, our views, our ideology, the people, our identity. We cannot separate ourselves from them just because we want to adopt a different kind of system, which I call the Western supremacist system that has actually derailed us from understanding where our true focus is supposed to be.
Thank you very much, Ahmed Buhari. We still have in the studio Tokwe Fasua, Mariamu Aminu. We're still going to come back to you. We have one of our virtual guests trying to reach us now. Soji Adini, are you with us? Okay, welcome, Soji. I'm sure you've been listening to the conversation right here in celebration of IBB 82nd birthday, today, 17th August, 2023. And you have traveled far and wide. You've gone overseas. You've worked in the United Nations. We had to drag you back home so that you come and apply your knowledge in helping to deepen democracy and also good governance. With the benefit of hindsight, what would you have to say with respect to, let me ask you this question, our foreign policy, because you have been in the United Nations. Did you get that?
Can you repeat it? You said...
Yeah, I said, what will you say? What will be your take on our foreign policy as a country? What's our the central kernel of our foreign policy? Does it need rejiggling, retooling, overhauling, and what have you?
I think first and foremost, we need to understand that there is no nation that can develop to its full potential among the Committee of Nations without addressing the issue of the foreign policy. And foreign policy does not necessarily mean that we have to continue to latch onto our political or colonial or any entity that we have always dealt with over the years, we've seemed to have forgotten the days, where the nation of the world are so engaged with Nigeria. I mean, you do recall that former President Babangida was probably one of the most honored presidents that Nigeria has ever produced. I mean, these were the days that even the Queen would host and engage with President Babangida in a royal system in the United Kingdom based on his dexterity in managing the foreign policy, in a global space. Sometimes we seem to forget that the Japa Trindom is also linked directly or indirectly to the strength of our foreign policy. It is only when we see the value addition that we can bring to the world that we can understand why the average young Nigerian is interested in leaving the country for greener pastures. We have seen over the years that what we tend to celebrate here as success is no longer, a thing of joy for the younger generations anymore. They don't see the leadership, just like Professor Yusuf says, where is the leadership that they want to emulate? Because they don't see, just like Professor Killer just said, they don't see the value that you bring to the table that led you to becoming who you are. So they are willing to go out there and risk all there is and, make something for themselves. And the foreign policy needs to support their ideas. For instance, I keep saying that when we say that we lose millions of, maybe thousands of our youths to the US or the UK or Canada in people relocating, especially in the banking and the medical field, and nurses and all of that. It simply means that we have the potential, having over 200 million people, we have the potential to take a position and say, we want to supply the world with the best medical, workforce. And all we need to do is to go back and reintegrate our systems of production, ensuring that we have centers of excellence in the country that would, provide that particular group of people with the kind of training and knowledge that they need in order to become, the provider of those services to the world. Same thing in engineering, same thing in the tech world. India took this position, Bangladesh took this position several years back, and today Bangalore and Doha are the centers of excellence for several things just because the foreign policy position was taken.
Soji, if you can hear me,
Yes,
if you can hear me, just we want to go on break, and when we come back, we can further the discussion. I still have with me in the studio Professor Anthony Killer. We still have Mariamu Aminu, Ahmed Buhari, and of course, Dr. Tokwe Fasua. And we're going to break now. When we come back, we'll be looking at the issue of good governance. We've been hearing all manners of complaints and all of that. It doesn't mean that we haven't made progress. We have made progress. And Nigeria is work in progress. So whether you like it or not, we must collectively make this country work. We believe in this country. This is the only country you can live in without anyone asking you for visa. You are a first-class citizen in this country, whether you are poor, you are rich, you are old, you are young. And so, for that reason, I always want people to resonate hope and believe that something good will come out of the tunnel. Join us. Thank you very much for staying with us. It's been an interesting discussion on the state of our nation, new paradigms, new generation, new ideas. The whole idea is for us to generate initiatives, conversations, dialogue with a view to enriching our body of knowledge. I've had with me in the studio Professor Anthony Kila, Mariamu Aminu, they are still very much here. Ahmed Buhari is here, and Tokwe Fasua. We also have some of our virtual guests. We've heard from Osita Chidoka before now, Professor Usman Yusuf, Soji Adeni. We still have about 2 or 3 more to go. Time is not our friend, but we'll try as much as possible to see how we can squeeze in the viewpoints of some of our virtual speakers who have been waiting endlessly to add their voice to this conversation. I think I have, okay, I still have, I also have Engineer Azegbe. Engineer Azegbe, can you hear me? Engineer Azegbe, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're talking about, in this segment, we're talking about good governance. And we're going to, because time is not our friend, we're going to quickly take a look at some of the expectations, what we want to see in a government, you know, to help our people, to contribute to the well-being of the country, and also to ensure that the people have confidence in the government and the people who lead them. And so today is IBB's 82nd birthday. This conversation is all about, you know, deepening democracy, provoking platform for robust engagement of the issues, and with a view to coming up with resolutions or recommendations that will help government to move forward.
Thank you very much. I'm not a climate change expert, but I can lend some words regarding that.
Please, go ahead, go ahead.
Looking at the theme you've talked about, one thing I would like to see in this, in the government that has to do with governance and administering all of these challenges, handling these challenges that we face today in a changing world is communication. A good communication engagement strategies and good communication implementation. What do I mean by that? Communication is meaning and understanding. What we see most of the times is that what is meant is not understood by the people. So there may be a lot of good things going on, but if people don't understand, they can't follow. And with the new platforms we have in existence, the metaverse, youths that are very, very individualistic, and people that don't depend on what we used to know as the family, in quote, and simple community structures anymore. I think we need to improve that communication engagement so that they understand what is meant. And we too, as elders or parents, understand them and keep the system open and going. What we don't want is to lose that human capital that we have, that huge human capital resource that we have within the country and within these youth. Whilst I'm talking about IBB's birthday, if you profile the life of the person we're talking about, between the ages of 18 and 35 as a youth, what were his achievements? What was he doing? And if we take that message home, I strongly believe in coming back to the home side so that the communication flows and people will understand that if we are going to address a challenge like power generation in our country, it's a very capital-intensive venture that requires more than just talking on the internet and so on. If we want to address the issues of global warming, we're talking about increased carbon dioxide emissions from our own end. One thing I want you to bear in mind is that Africa is really not responsible for most of the pollutions that go into the atmosphere. But Africans are everywhere and can create, you know, and these Africans can increase the awareness that we have so that we have a safer world to live in. So I'll bring this back to the family and the extra efforts we need to make in keeping our family and community structures in place and ensuring that us as individuals and our children still patronize that because that is our identity. Thank you.
Professor Al-Qasim, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you offer some insights into how you think we can address our insecurity problems in this country?
The issue of insecurity needs a holistic approach. In terms of a holistic approach, it has to be the bottom-up approach. The people that we're up against are not ghosts. You know, they are people who live within us. When terrorists go to attack places, they actually pass villages. They pass everyday people. They see them. But what happens? Usually we are slow in responding to these emergencies. And why are we slow? If you check the leaked message of from the DSS, where they are saying that there's an imminent attack on the train, the DSS did say that the police force, the civil defense, and soldiers should be equipped with walkie-talkies. This is 2023. There's an imminent attack on the train services, and we are talking about equipping the soldiers and security forces with walkie-talkies. What have we been doing all these years? We've been fighting this insurgency for more than a decade, you know? So it shows that in as much as we have budgeted copious amounts of money to the war on insurgency, most especially, what it shows is that we're not getting the basics right. For example, our drone services, our drone platforms, how many of those do we have? You cannot fight an insurgency without employing technology. There are satellite images from all over the world, from satellite stations to show where these terrorists are. Are we relying on all of this? There are satellite images that the Nigerian military and the Nigerian Air Force can rely on to get the exact geolocation of the terrorist. Are we doing that? We don't necessarily need boots on the ground. You know, there's a drone base in Niger Republic, which is one of the reasons why the United States is extremely on the edge. You know, we can call for help in terms of technological transfer we need to do that. We need to do that. We need to rejig our military doctrine. We need to come up with more ideas and strategies on how to guard lives and property in Nigeria.
But still, you can still hang on. Maybe we'll still be able to connect with you. But let me come back to the studio where we have our distinguished guests, Professor Anthony Kila, Mariamu Aminu, Ahmed Buhari, and Tokwe Fasoa. Let's go to the issue of renewable energy, or maybe climate change. And let's look at the whole gamut of all of that package. The whole world now is so worried about climate change, global warming, and what have you. Ahmed Buhari, what do you have to say with respect to Nigerians' own approach to the issue of renewable energy, climate change, global warming? Are we doing the right thing? Are we even exploring the opportunities that abound in the global space with respect to getting grants, getting international support for all of these climate change emergencies?
Yes, so I'm very happy that before the last session you did mention that it's important for us to understand that we have made progress.
Yeah.
Indeed, we have. Maybe not at the pace that we want, but then we must be mindful of the fact that we're complex. We're more complex than most parts of the world. We, apart from having different tribes, different religions, different perspectives, over 774 local governments, nearly all of them speaking different dialects, different languages. It's hard for that shepherd to truly get everybody in the same direction. However, with regards to renewable energy, with regards to power itself, the first dam was commissioned around 1963 or so in Kaenji, and subsequently we've had a few other ones around, and during the IBB era, we did have a Shiroro Dam created and the Ebbing Power Plant also created. These have been functional for about 30, 40 years now. It's about time that we look at what is happening elsewhere and see how we can make this thing work. I think one of the biggest problems that the sector has had over the years is the fact that it's been controlled by government. And that is why I was so excited when, even before sitting down comfortably, the new president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, easily said, you know what, we're going to allow this place go free. You can generate if you want to generate. We're just going to be supervisors to ensure that you do these things according to the law, according to the system, and ensure that we get the results that we want. So I think, yes, we should look into hydro. We should look into gas. We can look into windmills. We can start. Why can't we have windmills all over the country? Why can't we have solar systems working for us? We've got enough sunlight. We shouldn't be carried away with the fact that the West is so having the discussion around gas so profoundly because they know they don't have the sun that we have. So let's focus on where our strengths are and see where this takes us.
Thank you, Ahmed. You see, Miriam, it appears Nigeria is confronted with so many challenges, chief of which is insecurity. I have raised it earlier on with one of our virtual speakers.
Yes.
And how do you think we can navigate around the issue of insecurity? Is it all about retooling and overhauling our security architecture? When you look at that, also marry it with the semi-unrests in the West African sub-region. The Chad military government, Mali military government, Burkina Faso military government, Guinea-Conakry military government, and the latest, Niger. All of this, hovers around the issue of insecurity. As much as we are trying to deepen democracy in Nigeria and Africa, some of these ugly incidences are rearing their heads.
Yeah.
What would you have to say?
Okay. Thank you very much. I think the issue of security, the issue of insecurity is really, everything for me comes down to hunger. There's a saying, a hungry man is an angry man, or a hungry youth is a really, really angry youth. And this is a prevalent issue. When we talk about economics, people just keep paring down their basic needs to just shelter, to, healthcare, and then eventually it's just food to eat. So hunger, poverty and hunger really drive our insecurity issues, which the political class that exploit. It could be they exploit our religious differences, they exploit our ethnic differences, our gender differences, cultural differences, but it often comes down to the basic needs. So, and if you look at this in the context of a new paradigm, I would argue that we're living in the Republic of Self-Help. And it's not my idea. There's a brilliant young
Republic of Self-Help.
Yes. There's
Okay,
a brilliant young
one.
journalist called Ibrahim Badamasi. He's gone down to the roots of several, about at least 10 conflicts in this country and spoken to the people in those communities. His conjectures, so the title of the book, which I'm hoping will be published very soon, is Oga is Not on Seats, the end of the military rule and the emergence of the Republic of Self-Help. And what his thesis is, once the military and its authoritarian rule and government people did not feel government was providing for their basic welfare needs or respecting their rights, they decided there's no government here for us. They did not see the coming dividends of democracy. So they decided, we're living in the Republic of Self-Help, we're going to help ourselves. Now, not realizing the process of picking up these sticks to help themselves, they were actually becoming part of the problem and even exacerbating the problem. And this is not different with Nigeria. So when you look at MEND in the Delta, their environment has been completely degraded. They feel robbed of their resources, which is feeding the whole nation, but they don't see dividends of that. You see the Bakassi boys in the East, young people, a lot of energy, don't see a lot of industry, don't see a lot of energy. Up north, they said we're very moral people in the Northeast, but every year our rivers are getting drier, Lake Chad is getting drier, there are no schools, there's no opportunity. Boko Haram, the people come spread a little bit of dollars with the help from outside extremist groups, these are the right people. Middle belts, same thing. We're ignored and overlooked all the time. It's like we're being flown over. Then the herdsmen come in. When they have sticks, nobody pay attention to them. They pick up an AK-47 and you know they're controlling the conversation when you encounter them. So these types of incidences, and they're also reflective of a generation. The boomers and Gen X, that's my generation, they tend to be apathetic to differences in these things. But Gen Y, the millennials and Gen Z are very angry and they picked up arms. At the same time, you're looking in the West where companies are growing. You see McDonald's, Burger King, and Pinkberry and Domino's, they're expanding here because companies have to grow. Otherwise, their shareholders get angry. We don't think about the gun businesses. So you're looking at small arms proliferation because these companies have grown beyond their borders. Half of Americans will not own a gun. The other half own 300 already. So they're expanding into our sub-region, and their geopolitics is also feeding into it. And then you also have 3/4 of the population in this country and many of the countries who did not live through the Civil War of the 60s, which we don't know how to talk about. So they find it glamorous. This is also why they're also leaning towards these ideologies of bringing back the military. They did not live under the difficulties associated with military regimes. So now you have people living in the Republic of Self-Help, and they're creating security situations. Farmers can't go to the farms, and when they're going, they might force them to work on their own farms, or they will interrupt their harvest, or food's getting to the market. So what's happening now? We're living with food insecurity. As food insecurity, we have, in this country alone, we have 4.2 million people on the brink of acute malnutrition, 2 million of which are children. Aside from the fact that every single one of these lives are precious, if you had gone to a playground in the 1950s in Minna, you would not look at any of these kids and say, these 2 kids are going to become future presidents of this country. If you've gone to a playground in Kano, you would not have looked at a bunch of kids playing and necessarily picked out the person who's going to become the largest industrialist on the continent, the richest black man on earth. You would not have gone to a little playground school and picked out a young girl and said, this girl's going to go to MIT and then she's going to become the head of the World Trade Organization. Or in Kaduna, the person who's going the young girl who's going to become the number 2 at the United Nations, and force them to literally live up to their commitment to gender equality by having half of the country directors of the UN be women, half of the heads of agencies be women. So we're not just losing precious lives, we could be losing somebody who's going to be a phenomenal change agent in the future. You mentioned Bill Gates, the gentleman who created the vaccine, the person who discovered antibiotics. That person could be any one of these kids who we're potentially losing every day. And the last thing I want to say is I want to give credit to this government. What you're looking for in a leader like President Babangida is someone who doesn't run away from the problems, who faces it like he did the IMF and the need to devalue or float the naira. Today, President Tinubu has declared we have a food insecurity emergency. He declared it, and he's prioritized it. He has allocated 500 billion naira towards it, and he has housed this issue in the National Security Council. There's nothing that says something's a priority more than that. So I want to give credit to them, but we also want to watch them, and we want to make sure that as citizens, we're not just expecting the government to fix everything. We have to step in and support homegrown agencies, community-based organizations. We've got to intervene and make sure that our people survive. If we don't, our national psyche is going to be damaged by starvation. Foreign investment is not going to come in. And again, vicious cycle. We're going to keep going down. This is a vicious spiral down.
For those wonderful insights. Someone wrote this morning, one of IBB's loyalists, he said, at a time like this, what will Babangida have done? That was the question he asked himself in paying tribute to IBB, and he traced this particular statement to when Babangida was in government, and he said that was the period that he created DFRI, People's Bank, Community Banks, Microfinance Bank, ND, National Directorate of Employment, NARFund, to give loans to small and middle-scale enterprises, mass transit, NCC, NDIC, NBC, and all of that. Tokwe, let's come to the basic, taking inspiration from this perspective. What do you think government can do to actually, deepen conversation around small and medium-scale enterprises? Because this is the sector that the youths are mostly interested in. They want to attract soft loan, they want to get grants so that they can set up one small business or the other and all of that. While you are answering that, also put into consideration the fact that we have not been able to capture essentially the informal sector, into the tax net. And so a whole lot of issues around that. So please,
thank you very much.
Let's have your input.
There's so much to say. I'll try and speak very fast so that we can cover as much as possible. So first of all, about the capturing of the informal sector into the tax bracket is not what they want to hear now. So let's free them, okay? As a matter of fact, President Buhari, in his tenure, and because of COVID and all of that, you know that anyone with a turnover of 25 million naira per annum, which is about 2 million every month, and below, you are not entitled to pay tax. You are not even supposed to collect VAT on behalf of government. So that's that, So the issue is not to capture them for taxes. The issue is how do you help them now? And this takes me to the issue of MSMEs, right? So you see these small businesses and most of these informal businesses, for me, they're not even the definition of entrepreneurship. They're just, the last gasp of people trying to survive, okay? So people are just trying to survive. I mean, I remember one day, I had a colleague come over from London. We had a training to do in Mina for, CBN a long time ago. And as we were driving into Mina, because he stays in Abuja, I drive him to Mina very early in the morning. And as we were driving into Mina, those adjoining roads inside Mina, people, and the guy, I didn't notice because it was normal to me. And the guy said to me, Duncan, he said, you people are so independent. Everybody was pushing their truck of oranges and bananas and carrots and so on into the streets. Because he said in the UK where he's from, people will have to wait for government to see what they can do for them. But here people are struggling. So now, however, I would say that we shouldn't rest on our oars. This idea of trying to survive one way or the other, for how long will it last? Look, we have 41 million MSMEs in Nigeria. 41 million of them, according to Smedan records. And most of those people are actually micro businesses. People just surviving, selling one thing or the other. Now, the thing is this, I've actually been interrogating that sector to wonder whether indeed what we need are small companies or what we need are big companies, or whether people want to stay as startups. And there's a startup bill recently, which I'm also questioning, that look, having a startup is not a badge of honor. What you should do, when they talk about startups in the US, young boys and girls, they come together, they form companies, they grow it as if you are rearing chicken. They sell it for money. In fact, beyond startup, what we need in this country is we need to have a secondary market for businesses. So that if you're running a pharmacy and you're getting old and your children are all abroad, you should be able to advertise in the newspaper and say, look, pharmacy for sale. Very, very important beyond startups, because people intend, this is as if, I want to be a startup, I want to look good like, in Yabeji or one of these young guys and so on, And in fact, the same he recently called it, what did he call it recently? He called it wallets of poverty. That look, we've been doing a lot of this financial inclusion and all of that, but it seems like poverty still remains. So you asked the question, which I think I want to land with, but it's going to be a fairly long answer. What would IBB have done? So I want to assume that going by the same trajectory of IBB's involvement of intellectuals, this is what may have happened. And I think I want to recommend that to this government. I also think that the present government of Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has also been known to be a thinker in that same realm, headhunter, they've started. We give them some time, and all of that. And you can see they're also listening. When they're taking a policy, it seems it's not going, they come back. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In the field of economics, all right, sometimes you roll a policy, you look at the effect of the policy, it's not going the way it should, plus and minus, cost and benefit, you can roll back.
There's no claim about that
absolutely
at all.
nothing around about that. So, about 74 years ago, we started University of Ibadan, indeed, as University College Ibadan. So we have no excuses that we are not thinkers. Today, we have more than 250 universities around the country. The solution to our problems lies in our brains. We know what our problems are. However, it's not about blowing grammar, like the gentleman said earlier on. We're not blowing grammar. It's about putting our ideas on the ground, documenting our ideas and also pushing for implementation. In fact, the more ideas and the more intellectualism that comes on board, the more the likelihood that we're going to find our way through. Therefore, what we should be thinking about, let's begin to have these discussions around this issue of digitization, around self-sufficiency, around the need for speed that our young people have, and how do we go about the discussions around artificial intelligence, how much work is it taking from our people, the discussion around do we want to have small company 41 million, are we building it to 50 million, and are we breaking out of all of that to do bigger things? Because here we are, we're sitting down here, entrepreneurship is about innovation, and we're using the product of innovation. As we're speaking, there are young people in their parents' garage somewhere in America, creating the next big thing that's going to take over the world. And we want to be able to challenge our children to be able to do that. So basically, we have to look at living through tech, no eagerness to create new things and all of that, in this part. And even, lastly, I'll say, the discussion about corruption or no corruption. Whereas corruption is a symptom. Bad governance is a symptom. Over time, Nigerians grew to become cynical. People go there into government, they say, oh, listen, this is my turn to eat. It's about growing up mentally further, okay? In the US, if you look at the US in 1850, New York, for example, just yesterday, I was looking at a picture of Manhattan in 1850 and today. In that 1850, there was a guy, a very corrupt guy called Boss Tweed, William Tweed, one of the most corrupt human beings ever. But do you know that was the guy that made sure all of those contracts happened in New York to build all those skyscrapers, the bridge, or some of the bridges and so on that you saw. The issue is not corruption. The issue between corruption, in fact, no, corruption is just a symptom. The corruption of America is probably worse than ours. The difference being that they were corrupt, they stole money, they kept it in their country. But we are externalized. We take the money, we send it abroad. Bad governance is not the real problem, it's just a symptom. How do we get our people to now come together, think together, and understand that we have... Look, sorry, just 1 second. Our youths are running away. But we have a platform called Nigeria. In time, some of them realize that this is the best way. We cannot stop them now. Anybody that can go should go, because in 6 months' time, their skin starts to change. They're looking more robust. You can't stop them.
If given opportunity, I know you will still give us several perspectives and insight into this subject matter. But never to worry, there will still be other platforms where we can always call on you to come and offer your insights into some of these issues. Let me, on behalf of the IBB Legacy Dialogue Group, express our profound gratitude to Professor Anthony Kila. Thank you very much. And to Mariamu Aminu, the Amazon in the house. To Ahmed Buhari, the man that is technologically savvy. And to our economist in the house, Dr. Tokwe Fasiwa. I want to thank you, I want to thank everyone, our virtual audience and speakers. Osita Chidoka, former Minister of Aviation and former Corps Marshal, Federal Road Safety Commission, and Professor Usman Yusuf. Thank you for your insight. Some people re-echoed your thoughts, say, oh, it's not all about grammar. Yes, we want to be pragmatic, but at the same time, we need to articulate the issues. We need to constructively engage the issues so that whatever will come out of the process will be something that will help take us out of these present challenges. We also have Bright Jaja. I'm sorry that I couldn't take all your thoughts. And also Engineer Azegbe, even though you said you weren't an expert in climate change, you were still able to offer a lot of insight. And to my good friend and brother, Soji Adeniyi, the UN parliamentarian. I call him that. That is just like a nickname. Thank you for coming on the show and contributing your insight and giving us your perspectives on this very important subject matter. And to several others, our audience here, we appreciate you for giving us that mental, mental angle to our discussion, because we did actually ask that we need, a small audience right in the studio. That will also make the studio livelier. On behalf of all of us here, on behalf of IBB Legacy Dialogue, we want to thank Her Excellency Aisha Babangida, the stormy petrel of the Babangida dynasty. She's been so wonderful. She's been doing a lot to sustain the legacy of her parents, the leaders first man of, how will I put it now? First president, that people can connect with, because Ibrahim Babangida actually launched the Better Life program and gave teeth to the office of the First Lady. And Miriamu Aminu is so excited by that, because in her opening speech, she talked about that. You can't take that away from Ibrahim Babangida. She was a woman of ideas, a woman of initiatives. She was so down to earth in all she did. She built the Women's Center, which is now named after her, from the scratch, from philanthropists and donations from highly spirited people, individuals in the country. We will continue to appreciate the Babangida family, all the support staff, Lani, Tolu, all of you. We'll appreciate you. It's another fantastic 82nd birthday, and we're looking forward to 83rd birthday of the one I call the Last Dawn. Thank you to all our participants, and I want to wish all of us to stand up while we shout happy birthday to IBB as our parting shot. You can face the camera if you want. Happy birthday to IBB.
Happy birthday.
Long life and prosperity. Happy birthday. To the People's General, the leader of leaders. Come and join us. 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 Oh yeah. Please shoot our Gen Z generation.